Well, hey folks, on August 14th, a mother reported that she was knocked unconscious in a Yucaipa Big 5 parking lot and that her baby had been abducted. Within days, though, detectives were saying that the kidnapping never happened, and now both parents are arrested. Rebecca and Jake Haro are facing murder charges while the 8-month-old baby boy Emmanuel is presumed deceased. The search for his remains continues as his jail-clad father leads police on a desperate search. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks so much for tuning into this case. This missing 8-month-old case has now been classified as a homicide by police. Now, before we talk about it, I hope you'll take a moment, hit the like and subscribe button, ring the bell, and make sure that you have notifications turned on so that you don't miss a single episode of Profiling Evil. And please share us with your friends. But now let's look into this crazy disappearance of little Emmanuel Haro in Southern California. And before I begin to share some of the thoughts I discussed on Court TV, I want to step back and review the timeline in this case. I think it's important that we look at how this case unfolded day by day, because the sequence of events really helps us understand the behavior and where investigators are focusing their attention, and why, frankly, the search for Emmanuel has taken such a dramatic turn. This little 8-month-old child was reported missing, disappeared, abducted from a Yucaipa parking lot on August 14th, 2025. But the question is, did he really? Now, the case has sparked a massive investigation. Initially, it was reported as the abduction of the child. Rebecca Haro, who said she was changing the baby's diaper next to her car at the Big 5 sporting goods store on August 14th, just before 7:45 p.m. Now that's in the evening. She said she was attacked and knocked unconscious. And when she came to, the infant was gone. Now when she told her story, she said an unknown man approached her and greeted her with an hola. And then she said there was blackness, or I think in her words, she said everything went white. Anyway, she reports that she wakes up on the pavement. She has a swollen eye, a black eye, and an empty spot where her 8-month-old should be sitting. Well, deputies searched the area, but the baby has not been found. Wasn't found then and still isn't today. Now, the following day, Rebecca, sporting that black eye, spoke to reporters on camera, and she pled for Emmanuel's safe return.
Now to a story that we've been following all day, the search for a 7-month-old boy reportedly kidnapped in Yucaipa. The baby's mother says that she was in a parking lot when someone hit her on the head, knocking her out. She says that when she came to, her baby was gone. Inland Empire Bureau Chief Rob McMillan live in Yucaipa. And Rob, you spoke with the devastated parents earlier this afternoon.
That's right. There's a lot of concern out here in this community about exactly what happened. Family members have been out here all day passing out these flyers, desperate to find out what happened to this 7-month-old boy reported kidnapped out of this Big 5 parking lot last night here in Yucaipa.
Just give him back to me again. Please don't harm my son. Please, I'm begging you. Please, God, please.
Rebecca Haro, inconsolable. A large bruise on her right eye the day after she reported to police that she was attacked in this Big 5 parking lot in Yucaipa, knocked unconscious. She says by the time she came to, her 7-month-old son, Emmanuel, was gone.
He was very playful. He loved his sister. His sister always kissed him.
He was a healthy baby. He was crawling. He was kicking. He was playing with his toys.
Jake and Rebecca Haro say they were at 7th Street Park in Yucaipa last night for youth football. Rebecca leaving the park to come here to Big 5 to buy a mouth guard for her stepson right around sunset when she noticed Emmanuel needed a diaper change.
I got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, "Hola," and that's all I remember. And I saw white. And a hearing sound, I fell on the floor. And I said, as I got up, I couldn't find my son. I checked all around my truck.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
Investigators returning to the scene this morning. They had search dogs out here last night trying to pick up a scent. But so far, nothing.
That they didn't take any of her belongings. They just took our son.
Please, if anybody knows anything, please come forward, please.
There is a lot of concern out here about exactly what happened to this 7-month-old child. Anyone with information on this case is asked to call the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. Live in Yucaipa, Rob McMillan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Family members were handing out flyers in the parking lot where this alleged abduction occurred, and searches were happening by officials and concerned people all across the county. By Saturday, though, August 16th, law enforcement officers in the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department announced that both parents had been interviewed, and investigators were uncovering some troubling inconsistencies in their testimony. When they confronted Rebecca specifically, she declined to continue the interview, and her husband Jake, he reportedly had already secured an attorney. Now, the department was left grappling with the possibility that the parents were involved in this child's disappearance. And in the week that followed, police searched for Emmanuel. The search across San Bernardino County and, frankly, Southern California intensified. The police were securing search warrants, searching the couple's home. They seized the father's vehicle. They had canine dogs, cadaver dogs, out in the residence in the backyard. There were reports of digging holes in the backyard. And with seizing Jake Haro's vehicle, they also took custody of electronics, and they began reviewing surveillance footage from the areas of interest, which I suspect mean the parking lot of the Big Five and then around the neighborhood. Jake Haro's attorney stepped up and told Los Angeles Times that the couple had surrendered their phones and their iPads, and I don't quite get this, along with 3 Xboxes, and investigators had those in their custody. Now, no Amber Alert was issued because law enforcement lacked the specific suspect and vehicle information that's required under California criteria to publish an Amber Alert. And by Thursday, August 21st, law enforcement in nearby Riverside County confirmed that a different child abuse case in Moreno Valley was tied to Rebecca and Jake Haro, although details of that investigation are being withheld as the probe continues. And then on Friday, August 22nd, with Emmanuel still missing, both Rebecca and Jake were arrested on suspicion of murder. Now, their arrest happened before dawn as armored vehicles breached the gate at their Haro home. San Bernardino sheriff's officials announced that they didn't believe the kidnapping story, but they did believe that little Emmanuel was deceased. Now, they committed to the public their continued effort to try to locate this child, but this places the case now in the category of a no-body homicide investigation, where prosecutors have to proceed on circumstantial and forensic indicators of death rather than having a recovered body. And that's where things got really interesting, because through it all, the mother's on-camera posture has remained firm. She says that she was attacked and her baby was taken. But the investigation arc is heading in a completely different direction. Now, whether negotiated or investigatively insight-driven, Jake Haro must have started talking, because law enforcement coordinated their investigative and search efforts. They had multiple warrants, and they were serving those by Sunday, August 24th. And now law enforcement and Jake Haro were found near the freeway on the 60, and that became a real interesting point of social media discussion. because in that area, search teams and cadaver dogs were scouring the rugged terrain along the westbound shoulder of the 60 freeway near the Gilman Springs Road. Now, what's really intriguing, if not telling, is that Jake Haro was present at the location in his orange gel jumpsuit, appearing to be either talking to law enforcement or directing the search. Now, it looks like, to the naked eye, that it's a reveal, a suspect leading law enforcement to a body. But visual drama isn't evidence, and investigators later stressed that he was at the site, but he wasn't assisting in the search. So it brings up a couple of questions that I talk about on Court TV about why on earth he was at the scene. Sadly, at the end of the day, Emmanuel was still not found. The investigation continues, and both Rebecca and Jake Haro prepared for a court appearance on Tuesday, August 26th. Now, they were ultimately charged with murder and filing a false police report. The court documents are suggesting that baby Emmanuel may have been killed as early as August 5th, some 9 days before Rebecca Haro reported the abduction, which allows them to stage the crime scene, to come up with a story. And that might be what we were watching on camera. Now, the affidavit says that on or about August 14th, in the county of Riverside, state of California, the defendants did willfully and unlawfully report to a police officer, a deputy sheriff, and a member of the California Highway Patrol that a felony had occurred, this abduction. And that was the second charge. So they're facing murder charges, which means they must have some kind of physical evidence or confession that suggests that they murdered the baby. Well, after laying out this timeline, I wanted to share a conversation that I had on Court TV about this case. Vinnie Politan asked some pointed questions about why investigators would take Jake Haro, who's already under arrest, to the search site in the desert. Was this about following up on digital evidence like telematics on the vehicle or phone? Or was Jake Haro starting to cooperate? Well, here's a clip from that exchange.
Here to help answer that question, private investigator with more than 20 years experience, Jason Jensen, and retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, Mike King. Great to have you both here. Mike King, the father, Jake, was with them. Now, we don't know, the report is that he wasn't part of the search itself, but he's there with them. They don't get there accidentally, do they? They're not picking a random spot. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I'm going a couple of directions, and I like what Jason mentioned about the possibility of animal depredation. There also are mountain lions throughout that region and regular spottings. As you know, Vinny, my office was about 10 miles from there in Redlands, so I know that area pretty darn well. I've wandered around in that area. Here's a couple of things that came to me right off the bat. Number one, there's a couple of reasons why you take a suspect, in this case now a defendant, out to a site. They may have had some telematics off of the vehicle that put that vehicle there for a significant amount of time, or they may have already collected some information off of the mobile devices, the phones and the iPads.
Let me hold you there one second, Mike. Are you saying that maybe the information didn't come from Jake? They're not there because of something Jake said?
We need to think about this in a couple of different buckets, Vinny, because right off the bat, it's possible that they may have collected and developed leads on their own. And sometimes you take a suspect to the area so you can watch the suspect. It's more about the show to see what the suspect's doing and how they're reacting. But we have to now take the completely 180-degree turn that maybe this guy has turned up some information and said, listen, you give me a deal, because we know he's got a lawyer in the business, and why would a lawyer let him go out there? And maybe they've worked out some kind of a deal and they're starting to share some information. And the thing that makes me think that's more likely, Vinny, is the fact that there weren't two investigators out there with the suspect wandering around and trying to watch his behavior. There were 40 or 50 people out there combing that area and working with search dogs. And, you know, I've been out on searches with Jason before with his dog. Depending on the time of day, they may have better success in the early morning hours than at night. So the fact that there wasn't follow-up all makes me wonder what on earth was going on. Is this all part of a whole process to see his behavior, or were they following up on something that he might have given up? And I guess those are the two buckets that we have to kind of theorize about now.
Now you can catch the rest of my interview where I talk about a few of the questions that I still have regarding this case on Court TV. And I want to thank Vinnie Politan and the entire Court TV team for the chance I've had to be on their program each week for the last 6 years. It's one of my personal highlights to share a little bit of airtime with such amazing subject matter experts. Oh, and by the way, if you're following this case with me, you've probably found yourself asking some of the same questions that the investigators are wrestling with right now. Things like, how could the parents who are accused of such horrific things appear so normal on the outside? And what can a crime scene, especially when there's no body, really tell us about the predator's mindset? And these are things that I dive into in my new book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. In fact, I love chapter 2, when predators disassociate and justify their crimes, because we look at how offenders compartmentalize their behavior, how they live these double lives that fool neighbors, friends, even family members, how they suppress guilt and build these elaborate self-justifications to make it easier for society to overlook their dark impulses. You might be asking questions like, why is society so easily fooled by predators who can appear so normal? Or questions like, how does disassociation help offenders rationalize their crime? This chapter sheds light on both of those. And then, of course, chapter 9, First Contact to Final Trace, is a way to break down the locations that the predators are involved in. From where the first contact is made, to the site where the assault occurs, to perhaps where the remains are left. Each stage reveals planning. It reveals the psychological state of the offender. And in this particular case, we have those locations to look at. Now, it helps you understand why it's critical to break the crime down into separate crime scenes, and what this disposal site, wherever this little child might be found, will reveal about the predator. These are the kind of questions that matter in cases like Emmanuel's. So if you're in the USA, you can pick up signed copies of Wolves in Sheep's Clothing right at my website, profilingevil.com, and I'll even deliver it to your door for free. Or if you're listening anywhere else in the world, you can get the book in hardbound, paperback, ebook, or audio through Amazon.com. This case is heartbreaking, but it also underlines exactly why understanding predators and their behavior is so darn vital. And all of this leaves me to wondering if there's been a confession in this case. There's no credible reporting or official statements that say either parent has confessed. And previous coverage describes interviews as inconsistencies, this cessation of cooperation. But again, no confession is cited by authorities. But it makes me wonder, why was the father at the desert search? And was he leading law enforcement there? Now, NBC Los Angeles and ABC 7 both report that Jake Haro was present, but noted that he wasn't helping. Now, you're not going to let him help. He's in handcuffs. He's in custody. But did forensics lead law enforcement there, or did Jake Haro lead law enforcement there? You know, investigators sometimes bring a suspect to a location to clarify routines, timelines, or just to observe their demeanor. Their presence alone shouldn't be read as cooperation or a confession. And Rebecca Haro, she still maintains that the assault and the abduction happened, even as recently as just a few days ago. So how does that square with the murder arrests? You know, these kind of behaviors actually happen more than people realize. Detectives are firm that Yucaipa's kidnapping did not occur, and they've shifted to a homicide framework without a recovered body. And that suggests that they believe there's a preponderance of physical and digital evidence that contradicts the abduction narrative, and that her public insistence is just a statement of innocence, but it's just a red flag and a way to divert attention. The arrest is a statement of probable cause. Those can coexist pending the trial that's going to come up. And if you're wondering why that Amber Alert wasn't issued again, it's because the California Amber Alert criteria requires that specific suspect and vehicle details are used to mobilize the system. So I want to just talk about behavior for a few minutes, because the case is as much about a narrative construction as it is about evidence at this point. Abduction from a public parking lot is statistically rare, and when claimed, investigators laser in on corroboration, things like surveillance video, witness accounts, vehicle descriptions, physical mechanics of the supposed attack. And here, the sheriff's saying it didn't occur, which implies that the available surveillance and physical evidence doesn't support the story. Physical injury, that black eye, complicates perception. But injuries can be consistent with an assault, or they can be from completely unrelated causes. And detectives are going to time anchor that injury to determine when it occurred. Who noticed it maybe before those dates? And were there any medical records substantiating the timing of it? They're going to check for concordance with the alleged event. Now, the mother's early emotional appeals are typical in both genuine and staged cases. But did you notice she was crying, but there were no tears? She was checking the camera to kind of get a little bit of a feedback on whether people were buying the story. Now, that could be completely off base. The consistency and details across the interviews are what really matters, not the presence of tears or lack of tears, although each of those really weigh into this, especially when we learn more about what her behavior is like in normal situations. You see, in this day and age also, we got to remember that the phone is a witness. App pings, lock and unlock logs, locations, direct messages, search histories, each can scaffold or shred a story. And investigators have seized their phones, their iPads, game consoles, and the father's vehicle. So expect them to triangulate the movements and attempt to reconstruct machine-verified timelines so that they either align or they contradict the parents' accounts. This sort of pattern often drives decisions in criminal cases. So let's talk about law enforcement taking Jake Haro to the search site. Seeing Haro in a jumpsuit near that search area screams that he's taking him to the body, but they didn't find a body. But just keep in mind, in practice, sometimes detectives will stage walkthroughs with the suspect in order to test their narrative. Show me your route, point to the turnoff, resolve inconsistencies we're seeing, or frankly, just to observe nonverbal behavior. To me, the most significant thing in that location is that it wasn't a couple of detectives with Jake Haro. There was a huge cadre of searchers and cadaver dogs. And I think that makes the site much more important than it might appear. Now, for police to arrest for murder without recovering the child, detectives typically have to believe that they can show death by some kind of inference, a medical impossibility of survival. Things like forensic signs of violent trauma or decomposition, or incriminating transfers like blood, DNA in the home and the car, and linkages that tie the suspects to some motive and opportunity. Their inconsistent statements and their digital evidence. Now, the public may not see that evidence until the filings or the testimony surfaces. Meanwhile, language from the sheriff's office saying that they don't believe the child's alive and they don't believe the kidnapping story is a strong signal of confidence in the evidence that they do have. So a big consideration for me in this entire case is that prior history has to also serve as a behavioral lens of future behavior. Now, it's not a verdict, but ABC reported that Jake Haro had previously pled guilty to willful cruelty to a child in an earlier separate matter. And this was before Emmanuel's birth, but it shows previous history. Perhaps a pattern of behavior, but it's not, again, proof of guilt. Investigators, however, will map out his history against present-day stressors, things like financial strain, whether the child was fussy, sleep deprivation, substance abuse, relationship conflicts. All of those things are going to weigh into this. So let's consider what we know versus what we don't know at this point. We know that the initial report suggests the assault happened outside the Big Five on August 14th, but the baby wasn't at the scene when law enforcement got there. There apparently were inconsistencies in the mother's account, and we have to take that into account. We know that law enforcement is now suggesting that that child may have been murdered even as early as August 5th, 9 days before the date of report. We know that warrants have been served, that dogs have been searching, that electronics have been seized, that a vehicle's been seized. We know that both parents are arrested for murder now, and there's got to be something supporting those murder charges. They've got to have something that's telling them that Emmanuel is no longer alive and that they're responsible for his murder. We know that there was a separate child abuse call in the Moreno Valley, and that was tied to the Haros. That investigation's ongoing. We know that on August 24th, near 60 and Gilman Springs, that there was a search going on, and that Jake Haro was present in jail garb, but not helping in the search. And we know that they've now made their first court appearance. But here's a couple of things we don't know. There's no confirmed confession, so we don't know whether they've confessed or not. There are no real details on evidence that's been collected, including whether the separate child abuse investigation is going to factor into this homicide case. And there are a couple of things that you can keep in mind as you sleuth this case. Investigative posture flips on corroboration, not emotion. Early appeals and visible injuries don't carry the day when it comes to maybe surveillance gaps or digital timelines. So just the fact that she says I was beat up, here's my black eye, doesn't mean that it happened. There's no body in this case, but a no-body homicide hinges on convergence. So expect the DA to bring together theory and digital records, forensic evidence, timeline impossibilities, and statements so that they can collectively exceed this reasonable doubt concern, even though they may not recover that little child. And keep in mind the public spectacle cuts both ways. Community vigils are going on. Internet attention is really ramping up. But all these can generate rumor-driven detours. So law enforcement has to be careful to focus on the facts. They have to have careful language here as well. And you can hear them using that careful language. We believe the child's deceased. We don't believe the kidnapping occurred. All of these are signifying confidence without prematurely disclosing contested evidence. So in the coming weeks, continue to watch for these charging documents that are now starting to trickle out. We're seeing just little bits and pieces coming out, and hopefully we'll see the full charging document that will include any forensic findings or cell site telemetry crumbs. And we're going to hopefully get clarification on that Moreno Valley child abuse case and whether it is part of this case or not. We should see some follow-up searches in the 60 Gilmore Springs corridor or perhaps elsewhere as investigators tighten a disposal window. So here's where I'd really like you to take a moment and share your thoughts on the case. I mean, answer a couple of questions. Where do you think the little baby Emmanuel is? And what do you make of investigators saying the kidnapping never happened? Put your comments down below in the comments section because I really do read those. I love the conversations that happen, and I hope as you do so that you'll be respectful as we learn with each other. Now, if you want to go even deeper into the criminal mind, check out our playlist, Profiling Evil Academy, right here on our YouTube channel. And while you're at it, hit the like and subscribe button and share Profiling Evil with your friends. And believe me, that thumbs up does help us grow this community. So please give us a thumbs up and share us. You can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you're more of an audio person on the go, make sure you're checking out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to stop by profilingevil.com, our website, where you'll find our interactive story maps, our unsolved homicides and missing persons global map, a place where you can actually enter cases from your own community. And you can get details on my books. Now, you've already heard about Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, but I'd encourage you to check out Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. It chronicles my undercover work in the takedown of a destructive religious cult. Proceeds from that book are going to help with a children's justice center and law enforcement initiatives to save little children. And my other book, She Knew No Fear, which chronicles the story of my great-great-grandmother's murder in 1891 and how I solved that crime 130 years later. It's a great read, especially if you like Wild West lore. Hey folks, thanks for subscribing to Profiling Evil. Thanks for supporting Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.